Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. One of the more famous passages in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations occurs at the very beginning of Book 2 of the work, and it has to do with a set of reminders that he is telling himself to give to himself every day, or that he ought to hear from himself, literally, prolegen heauto, so to address to himself at the very beginning of the day, literally from dawn onward, eothen in the Greek. And the reminders have to do with dealing with difficult people. And Marcus is the emperor, so he's going to have to deal with a lot of people. He could just use his capacities for, autocratic rule to get rid of all these bothersome people. But he says that's not the way to go. And why not? Well, this is rooted in Stoic philosophy at a number of different points. So the first thing that he tells himself, and this is one of the very famous passages, and there's different ways of translating this. He says, I'm going to deal with, or I'm going to run into, sun teuxomai, right? The people I'm going to happen to have to work with in some way or another. I'm going to deal with a whole bunch of people, and they're going to have negative qualities or characteristics. And before we look at what these are, let's think about this a minute. There's a lot of people who think that if you're a Stoic, you should never, call people bad names, because that's just, in our minds, you're only insulted if somebody, you let them insult you. That is, if you take what they're saying as an insult, nobody's insulting in and of themselves. That's not the case here. Marcus is actually calling people what they are. And he's not saying, they're generally good people, but they do some bad things once in a while. He is willing to say they're in error, they don't understand things, but they are bad people. They're bad in certain respects. So what are these? Well, this is not a complete list, but it sure does cover a lot of ground. There are people who are meddling in Greek, and these are all in the dative, periergo. So ergon is, the task, the deed, the thing that has to be done. Peri means kind of around. So these are people who don't stick to their own work, and they get in everybody else's work, and they do a bad job as a result, and they also bother the people whose work that they're interfering with. So there's meddling people, ungrateful people, acharisto, right? So charis in Greek means something like joy, but it also means having the proper sort of response to somebody else benefiting you. So it could be reciprocity, it could be gratefulness. So we're dealing with people who take and don't give back, people who don't acknowledge what they are receiving from other people. Arrogant, hubriste, people who are liable to hubris, that is to abusing other people, to mistreating other people, to insulting them, sometimes bullying them. So arrogant, I think, works well for that. Dishonest, dolero. So dolos is guile or trickery or something like that. So the doleros is a person who is prone to that, somebody who's going to cut corners, somebody who's going to lie to you about the jobs getting done or about who's actually doing them or not doing them, the people who are going to conceal things. Jealous people, bascano, right? People who get, it's kind of close to the meddling in some respects. People who get upset about, what's going on with other people. And then finally, this is very interesting, surly, which is not necessarily the best translation for this. Koinoteto, right? So this comes from the word koinos, which means common. Koinonia means community or sharing. So these are people who don't want to share. They maybe want more than their fair share, or they don't recognize that we're, as we say, all in it together, as something that Marcus is really going to stress. So why are people like this? Why are people jerks of all these different sorts that Marcus has no problem calling jerks? Well, he says they happen to be like this, sumbainin, right, in Greek. They don't necessarily choose this. This is something that accidentally happens in their life because they're ignorant. They literally kata agnoion, because of the not knowing, the misunderstanding, the getting mixed up about goods and evils. And a lot of the translations actually say that they can't tell good from evil, or they don't know, good from evil. But it's quite literally good things or good conditions from bad things. It's in the plural. So they suffer because of this ignorance on their part. And Marcus says, okay, I am not in that condition, so I've got some greater responsibilities as a result. He says, I have seen, or I have contemplated, is another way of translating it. Theoreikos, right? This is coming from theromai, right? To look at, to contemplate, to be a spectator of, the word that we get theory from, or theorize, right? So I have seen, I understand is another way of saying this. I understand the nature, the phusis of good and evil. So they're ignorant. I'm not. That doesn't mean that I'm going to lord it over them. I am better than them in that respect, but that doesn't necessarily make me a better person than them. It really depends on what I do with this knowledge of good and evil. And what does he know about good and evil? I mean, lots of things, but here he's going to focus on two. I have seen the beauty of good, right? So good things are kalon. They are beautiful. They are fine, noble, honorable is a way of translating it. And the bad or the evil is ugly, eischron, disgusting, dishonorable, foul. Ugly is covering a lot of ground here. So I've actually seen that. And I also know another thing that's really important. The person who's doing wrong, the person literally who is in error or sinning, hamartantos, right, who's committing a hamartia, a error, a sin, a mistake, doing something wrong, they are of a nature, phusis, related to mind, sungenes, and not in terms of blood or origin or anything like that. They are of a nature that is related to mine because they have a mind, a nous. They are a human being, and they even have a share of the divine within them because they have a mind. Now, they're not using it well, right? So that's why they are these kind of jerks that we encounter, but they have the potentiality for that. And as Marcus is going to say in many other places, if somebody's screwing up, maybe you just guide them to something better. So there's a couple considerations that come out of this realization. One of them is they can't really hurt me. They can't harm or injure me. Obviously, they can hurt my body, but they can't really hurt me in who I am, nor can they drag me in or implicate me, parabale, in the sort of badness, the ugliness that they're themselves marked with because they don't understand good and evil. So I don't have to worry about them doing those sorts of things and then respond defensively against them. Instead, what I should keep in mind is, and this is really interesting, the word that he uses here, he says, I can't, utadunamai, get angry, orgidzasthai, with them, or hate them, apechthesthai, right? So this is coming from the word for being an enemy to somebody. But the other one is orgidzasthai, to literally to get angry, to be filled with orge, this rage or anger against people. Now, notice that Marcus doesn't say, I must not get angry with them. He says, I can't get angry with them. And, you might say here, well, wait a second. Obviously, as a human being, you can get angry with them. And in a lot of cases, you are going to get angry with these jerks that you're running into. You're the emperor. Somebody's ungrateful or somebody's meddling with your affairs. Why wouldn't you get angry with them? And so he says, no, I can't get angry with them, meaning that this is an irrational way for me to behave. This takes me away from the good if I do this. Why not? Well, he's got a metaphor here, and this is the other passage that I think a lot of people pick up on. We are supposed to work together. Pros sun ergian, right? We have a common task, a common working together that we should be engaged with, and we shouldn't be obstructing each other, getting in each other's way. Anti-prachain. So prachain is to do something, right? Anti, against in this case. So we shouldn't be at cross purposes, you could say. And he brings up this, interesting metaphor about bodily parts. We are born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, right? Each of them has its purpose. Feet get us around. And hands grip stuff and do things. And eyes pay attention to what's going on, right? You take any of them away and we're in a bad state. And he says, also like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower. If you only have one set of teeth, the uppers, you're in trouble. You're going to have a hard time biting and chewing your food, right? You better go on an all-liquid diet. Same thing if you only have the lowers, right? So we're supposed to be working together as human beings and not hindering, not getting in each other's way. And then he says, well, what counts as getting in each other's way? And here's where he's giving himself that caution, saying, this is why I can't allow myself to get angry. To get angry, and he uses a synonym here. So it's not orgidzasthai. In this case, it's aganaktein, which is another anger word we could say to rage, to get into a angry state with somebody else. To become angry is another way of translating it. Getting angry with other people or turning away from them. This translation has turning your back on them. But even just like distancing yourself from another person who you shouldn't be doing that with are forms of obstructing. Not working together, making myself the center of attention, the more important person, and not working with these flawed people, I'm flawed too, who I am going to encounter every day. So this all kind of hangs together as one long lesson about why we should not get angry and hate and distance ourselves from these people who are, liable to anger us, to cause us to want to distance ourselves from them, and who wants to hang around with arrogant people or dishonest people, right? Marcus is saying, this is going to be my job every single morning. Here's how I can keep myself from getting angry with them. Remind myself that they're screw-ups because they don't understand good and evil. I do, and because I do, I have a greater obligation to try to work with these people without losing my cool or my temper.